Welcome back to Man vs. Meeple, the show where we talk about everything board game related. Today we're going to be taking a look at a preview of a game called Feudum. It is a heavy economic medieval style game that has hand management.
Area control.
Area control, yeah, absolutely, David.
I mean, it has a slew of mechanics going on, and you, like you said, it is heavy, it's economic. There's a lot going on here, but it melts my brain in the most glorious way because the artwork and the whole style of this whole package is so fanciful and just lighthearted and fun it begs people to play it. So we've dove into it, and it is a big game with a lot of things going on. So let's get to it.
So just to note, guys, this is a preview copy of the game. Everything here you see has been handmade by the designer, and it actually looks so good that it could probably go into production as a handmade version.
It really could. I don't know how long it must have taken him to do it, but it is absolutely fantastic.
The board. Let's talk about the board first. This board is incredible. It's huge. It's long. It reminds me of an old game called Navigator, which came out 6 years ago, but it's one of those long style board games with a giant map that encompasses probably 4/5 of the entire board.
No, the board is it's a long, narrow board. We should have measured it, but I'm guessing it's probably 3 to 4 feet.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's a long board.
On the board, you have several different locations. There's 6 different regions in the game, and they go from islands to to large mountainscapes. In each of these regions, you have different locations or round tiles, which can house anything from towns to farms to outposts to even feudums, from which the name of the game gets its name. So on the board, you will be placing or using your pawns, which are represented by what people think are dice, but you don't roll these. These are actually indications of one of the 6 different guilds of which you can become a part of.
Exactly. It's one of the actions. We'll get into the actions in a second with your cards. When you put these pawns on the board, you're going to choose one of these sides, which is going to be your first step in gaining influence in that specific guild.
On the edges of the boards are the 6 different guilds, and you have the farmers, the merchants, the alchemist, the knight, the noble, and the monk. Each of these 6 guilds allows you to do 3 different types of things depending upon your membership or your activity within that guild. This is how the whole game really works. It's called the push-pull mechanism in the game.
Yeah, the whole game revolves around the guilds, really.
So if you are a guild master, meaning you have the most prestigious portion of that guild, you're allowed to push resources or do activities that push them into the next guild to your right.
Exactly. All the guilds have something to do with one another. So all of the economies going on here are connected in this gigantic circle.
That's right.
That you have to kind of really pay attention to, because to make something happen with the alchemist in a very direct way, you're going to need to do some things with the merchant, potentially the knight, and it all comes back around through the farm all the way to the alchemist again. So everything is dependent on each other, which is a lot to keep track of, but it's so much fun doing so.
Right. So getting back into the memberships within the guilds, the guild master can push. The guild journeyman, who is in second place, can pull stuff from the guild to their left, and the apprentice is just there to try to gain higher membership. All 3 of them get points, though, at the end of each of the epics. So having memberships or having spots or positions in those is key to be able to do not only those abilities, which get you victory points, but also getting you victory points just for membership alone.
Exactly, and that status is dynamic. So you can be the master one moment, and then be the journeyman, maybe even the apprentice. And then if you're playing with more players, someone can come in and kick someone out entirely.
That's right.
So these things, we were saying, they have so much to do with one another. If you're the master and you can push, you have to realize that you also kind of need the journeyman to pull. And the journeyman can just sit there and say, I'm going to let this dry up on you. So it really, there's a lot of interaction there. Probably the most interaction I've seen in a game like this, and it just adds one more layer of things you have to keep
what David's talking about, too, is that when he says dry up, each of these 6 guilds have resources that are involved with them, from just flat-out resources like your wood and your food to things like vehicles that allow you to travel. There's barrels, which allow you to get influence in new locations. The nobleman has the king seals, which actually allow you to build feudums, which are probably the most important portion of the game. They gain you the higher member status within those guilds you're trying to gain.
You mentioned the king seals, and this goes for almost all of the resources. There's multiple uses for all these things too, or at least most of them. So all these decisions that you have in front of you, because you could get a king seal, and like Jeremy said, you can use those to build the feudums, which is the top of the food chain as it relates to the locations.
Right.
But the other thing is there's end of game scoring cards too, and some of those require a king seal to even activate at the end of the game.
That's right.
So many decisions going on.
Yeah,
it's a lot of thinking going on, but like I said, in the most fun way possible.
Yeah, if you like heavy style games, think Venus, Gallerist, Madeira, those style of games. This is very much in that wheelhouse. So how's all this fueled? Well, at the beginning of the game, none of the pawns, or the dice, what we'll call them here for people who are looking at it, start on the board. Right. You're going to be using cards to introduce them. On a turn, each of the players that are participating will take their hand of 11 cards.
Yeah, and we all have the same cards.
Everyone has the exact same cards, and you're going to pick 4 of these cards to take actions with. And then in turn order, each player is going to reveal one of those and take the action of that. Right. The cards range in a whole variety of different things. We'll go through a couple of them. One of them will allow you to introduce
they migrate your pawns onto the board, into the world, if you will.
Right. Typically, it's paying a food and doing something else, possibly. You always have to move to a location where you have someone else, or to an introductory location on the board. So there's movement, which allows you to move pawns into new locations.
And this is a card that's going to be used almost every turn.
Right.
I mean, a lot of turns, because you need to get out there and you need to start moving around to secure those locations. The area control aspect Jeremy mentioned earlier is really what fuels the influence that you have in any of these guilds. You really need to secure those locations, convert and upgrade those locations to really get the game going.
Right. And the conversions portion he's talking about is that each of these locations has a beginning and an end, so to speak. So the outposts start as an outpost, and then they get turned into a farm if they get improved, which gets turned into a town, which will eventually get turned into a feudum.
Right, and the cool thing is about this is you don't necessarily want to go all the way to feudum. It's not like that's better than everything else. You need farms.
Yeah.
You need towns, depending on how you're going to play the game, because there's all sorts of different things you can do to take advantage of all those different things. Even the fortress, which is sort of the bottom of the food chain on the location chart, but there are cards that really help you benefit from that.
That's right.
So many routes to victory through all these things. It's amazing.
One of the best cards in the game that you'll be using a lot is the Guilds card. The guild card allows you to do a couple different actions with it depending upon your membership within the guild. Anybody, whether or not you have membership at all, can use the main action of that guild. And that's things like paying money to gain one of these ships that we mentioned that allows you to travel quicker around the board.
Buying resources,
gaining more influence markers,
king seals. Yeah, basically all of the resources associated with each guild. You're basically getting those things from them for money for the most part.
Right.
But then, back to the push-pull mechanisms. Those are the top 2 activities you can do with the guilds.
Right.
We said earlier the journeyman is the only one who can do the pulling.
Right.
And the master is the only one who can do the pushing.
Right.
And those take those same sort of ideas and resources, and like we said earlier, kind of affect the next spot or the last spot. So that's where the real economy aspect of this game comes in.
And it's super important to be in those positions because that's one of the main ways you're going to gain victory points.
Right.
When you're pushing those resources into another guild or pulling them and vice versa. What other cards do we have here? We have combat.
Yep.
Combat is a big portion of this game too.
It can be for sure.
It probably will be, but by the end of it, and the reason for that is that membership into these guilds is denoted by a couple different things. One is by the pawns that you have on the board. Those get you 1 point towards membership. However, a feudum of one of those same types gets you 3 points. So it's, as you said, these things get changed as you go.
Exactly. You can go on for a while thinking, I'm the master of that guild, I'm good. But it's, and you might have a pawn and a couple locations that help it, but one person does a feudum, all of a sudden they're the master and you're the journeyman, maybe not even the journeyman.
And the other thing is you can't attack any of these cities typically you can attack another player's pawn on the table.
Right.
However, if it's just a city that they've influenced but they don't have a pawn there, you can't attack it unless it's a feudum.
Yeah, unless it's a feudum. Once people go to the feudum stage, they're opening themselves up to attack, for sure.
Absolutely. The game plays out over a number of undetermined rounds, depending upon how many of the epic tiles get displaced.
Yeah, there are 5 epics in the game, and it's kind of player controlled.
Yes.
So these tiles will come off as you're improving.
Yes.
and you take one of these tiles off each one of these stacks is associated with one of the different regions.
Right.
You take these off, and then there's a little chart here that shows you when it is you need to move the epoch.
Right.
So you can kind of control it. If you've got a big lead early on, you can start doing things in this game to try to help speed it along.
Further. And how those tiles come off the board is by improving the locations that you have. Every time that you improve, each of these different tiles groups or sets or stacks gets removed. One of them gets removed when you improve on one of those specific locations or regions on the board.
You know, and the other side benefit to that is you take the tile, and on the other side of the tile is a landscape.
That's right.
And these are things that can be used. So this tile can be used as multi-purpose. It can be used as any given resources in a pinch.
Right.
So if you need something badly, you can just toss it and use it that way. But the landscape on the other side allows you to add the landscape to a location that you control with a surf. Actually, not that you control, but when you have a surf, which is another one of the aspects of this game, and you're able to build and get some more resources, even some different resources off of these landscapes that help you play the game.
Right. Speaking of serfs and subjects and owners of a location, you'll notice on the board here, just a setup location here, we have someone who owns the area, someone who is a serf.
That's a serf.
And then if you had another yellow one here, they'd be a subject.
Exactly.
And all those type of things, as you said, they play into the rules, they play in your abilities to do specific things at certain locations, where you can place a landscape, what kind of points you get for that location. When an epic gets turned over to the next turn, you're going to score points.
Right.
Points are scored for the guild memberships that you have, for the regions that you control. So the more regions that you control, the better. And there's some other aspects in there that you can score for. So, guys, this is a super heavy game. I mean, to explain this game, we would need to spend probably 20 minutes of our time going through all the different aspects of
we just want to give you a taste of it, a flavor for it, and give you an idea of what we think of it. There's plenty of videos that are going to go into deep detail on this thing. We know the designer's building some himself. Right. But we just wanted to give you this preview. And let's quite a game. Let's
talk about how we feel about the game, because I think we can do that, even though it's a preview, even though the components aren't done. Yeah. We've played it several times now, and it does have a learning curve to it.
It does,
but as you said, this game draws you in.
It really does.
There's so many good aspects of this. If you like decisions, and this game throws a ton of decisions at you every single turn, picking from 11 cards is just a portion of it. Deciding on where you want to control your territory, where you wish to move, the influence that you wish to put on there, which guilds you wish to control, because these guilds will give you unique abilities throughout the game. There's a lot of different decisions here.
What kind of game you want to play is really up for grabs a lot of the time. You really, like with many heavy games, as you've said, you have to kind of go down a path and try to stick with it as much as you can, because there's a lot of different places to score your points in this thing. And if you get distracted, you're probably not going to win the game. And that's what these games are all about, is really trying to most efficiently use everything that's out there to get your points.
And one of the cool aspects, too, that people that don't like combat, this has a lot of combat in it. People that don't like combat can simply go to remote regions that are difficult to get to. Now, a lot of these locations, like the mountains, require flight in order to get into them. The locations which are islands require boats or submarines to get to these locations. So going over here will allow that player to kind of turtle up.
Yeah, for the most part, because other players can't do everything.
No.
You can't. You just simply can't do everything in this game. If you've built a ship and gone out to these islands, there's a lot of turns and a lot of effort someone's going to have to do to get another ship to come out there and chase you. So, that and the mountains are really nice sort of reclusive areas for people who don't want a lot of conflict.
And that comment you made there is very true for a two-player game. A lot of complaints with people that play games as a two-player game is that you can typically do everything you want to do in a two-player game compared to a four-player game. In this game, even as a two-player game, you will be head-to-head with another player.
Oh, yeah.
Once the feudums start getting built, which will go into probably the third or fourth turn before players start to figure out how to build those feudums, you have to combat that. Yeah. Once a player starts controlling those guilds and starts pushing and pulling to their own locations, it becomes a real struggle for the other player. So they're forced into a situation where they have to do pretty much the same thing or find an effort to get back into the game by combating them
Yeah, exactly. The dynamic that's set up with these guilds, like Jeremy just said, if one person, even in a 2-player game, controls too many of those things, the other player can either interact with them or lose.
Yeah.
Because it'll just be sort of a long wait to losing. So it really encourages that interaction, which I think any big, huge economy type heavy game like this really needs.
So, guys, this is Feudum. I believe it's coming out very soon. Go check it out. We both really, really enjoy the game.
Absolutely.
Hopefully the designer will let us keep this copy. So anyway, check it out, guys. That's Feudum by Mark Swanson. Take care, guys.
Bye-bye.